Hi, everyone. Ooh, it's a nice, intimate crowd. I just came from speaking at a conference with about a couple hundred people, so this is much nicer, I think, for me, and hopefully a little less intimidating. Um, so, as I said, my name is Wincy. I look after innovation for our supply chain services at the Royal Bank of Scotland, of which NatWest is one of our big brands. So, I'd start off by introducing a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in New York. I grew up there. I met a Frenchman in a bar and ended up here 9 years ago. I know, and I was really shocked to realize British English is actually very different from American English, as all my colleagues at the Royal Bank of Scotland, once I was able to understand their accents, were able to tell me. And then the flower is because I love emojis, by the way, so that's why I promise this is the only one with emojis. But the flowers started because I didn't actually do really well in my studies at uni. I needed a side hustle. And so I decided to get a floral design certification from Parsons School of Design in New York. From there, I started a floral design business where I did weddings and events on weekends. Luckily, what I didn't do well in studies did not translate into a career. I was a qualified accountant. So I ended up at Deloitte. I used to run audits for investment management, hedge funds, private equity funds. So quite different. And I absolutely loved it. I also love food. I actually think nonstop about food. Like I'll be eating a meal and think about what's my next meal? What am I gonna have next? Or should I get a snack? Like right now, I'm thinking about some fried things that I probably shouldn't be eating. And so as a result, I decided to turn my love into a passion, into a career, and I started doing these supper clubs around London. So my parents were born and raised in Burma. My grandparents are Chinese. I'm all kinds of ethnicity. And I realized there was no Burmese food in London and started a series of supper clubs that always sell out. Then the last but not least, and probably the reason I'm here, I'm an absolute geek. I have a machine learning certificate at Stanford University. I like to build chatbots for fun. I also have lots of gadgets. I spend lots of money both on shopping for clothes and equal parts gadgets. I have the classic Amazon issue where I have all these boxes unopened and I'm actually not sure why I bought them. But I really wanted them at the time. Which is why I've been working in digital probably for the last 5 years, fueling this rage. And what I would say is that the reason I'm talking about all of these things is not to overshare and make you uncomfortable, although I love oversharing anyway, but mostly because I just want to point out how in a person's life or in their career, you can take many paths. And there's a lot of change that happens. And it's really important for us as a bank also to be open to that change and to have people in the bank who are willing to do that. And that's why it's important for innovation, because it's an absolute necessity. I know that you guys have had some talks about open banking and things. So far, this is a very classic fintech slide you might have seen elsewhere, where here's a website of a incumbent bank in the UK. And we as a bank, what we're really good at is everything. We're a one-stop shop. We do everything. But I will admit that we don't do all of it very well. So what the fintechs know is that there are actually specific customer experiences and pain points that they can do better. So that's what they've done. They've created, and you can see that there's thousands and hundreds of fintechs that can do maybe just the international payment or just a loan or just one aspect of a lot of things that we provide. And we know that that's happening and customers are being more open to it, which is why on the one side you have the Competitive Markets Authority in the UK telling us we have to open up the bank, and on the other side you have PSD2, Payment Services Directive 2, the EU Commission asking us to also open up. And this is scary for us. This is our version of oversharing, as a bank. We all of a sudden, the APIs that we used to own, the ones that we used to have control of, are no longer necessarily ours. And that's right, because actually the data belongs to the customer. It doesn't necessarily just belong to us. But because we kept it in that safe, secure little box, it's a big, scary thing. And what everyone wants is that increased competition. So in this world of increased competition, and increased customer experience is absolutely key. So this is a customer experience conference, and that is 100% where we need to focus on, or I know that we need to focus on as a bank in order to succeed. Now, we've been around for 300 years. I'm hoping we're around for another 300. But that can only happen if we keep innovating. So how do we do it? This is a kind of a high-level view of how I see the innovation at the bank. We start with identify. So what are the trends that are going on in the market? What are the customer trends? What are the economic trends? We have an aging population. What are the technology trends? Customers are getting more and more comfortable with what we call non-graphical user interfaces, but ability to use speech or use your face all of a sudden to unlock experiences. So what is going on in the world? And then from there, we think about what our bets are. And this is really important because this is a game of risk. And everything that we choose to do is a bet. So in define is where we actually try to decide, well, what is the bet we want to do? Does our hypothesis actually make sense? This is where we interview customers, we talk to them, we really try to find out, is there an actual pain point or is it just me? Is it niche or is it something that a lot of our customers have issues with? Is this something worth investing in? So that's in the define stage. Then we trial. Trialing is really important. We want to test small scale, do smaller POCs, see if there's appetite. Does the technology work? Are they people we want to work with? Do the customers actually like it? And when we trial things, I would say that I like to trial for at least 2 months, I would say. And it seems like a long period of time, but that's because it's important to understand a customer's financial cycle. And for the UK anyway, a lot of that happens on a monthly basis. So going through 2 months means that you have about 2 months of the cycle to see if in the first month, maybe they were just messing around. On the second month, are they coming back? And then analyze, that is where we see, did they meet the business case? Did they meet the KPIs we set out? Is this worthwhile? Should we be investing big money in it? Because we just invested a smaller bet. So now, do we make the big one? And if the answer is yes, then we take it to scale. And I'm not going to go into timelines or anything because that is wildly varied depending on the size, scope, and scale of the innovation project that we get involved in. But that's a rough, high-level view of how we innovate. So here are some of the innovations that came out of my teams in the past. So first is Cora. It's our artificially intelligent chatbot. We were the first UK bank to implement this. We saw the trend in artificial intelligence years ago, although to be honest, it's been around for 50 years, and people just keep rebadging it. But we wanted to create an experience to help our web chatters, because we were getting so much traffic through that, and we decided to use Watson technology to create something. It's across all our websites. It's now across our mobile app as well. We're answering over 100,000 queries a month at the moment. SnapTap Done. This is receipts management for small businesses. So if you move out of our personal retail customers and you move into small businesses, there are about 5 million small businesses in the UK. We are the biggest bank for them. We bank about 1 million of them. And what we found is that 86% of them are sole traders or single-owned entities, so one-man bands. And therefore, we wanted to do something to help them. So I actually went out, we interviewed a lot of customers and said, okay, we want to help you. What is it that keep you up at night? What are the things you're scared about? What are the things that worry you? And they said over and over, cash flow. I need to get a grip of my cash flow. I worry about it. So I asked, okay, well, how do you manage your cash flow? And they said, well, I have this box or this envelope or this bin liner full of receipts that I ship off to my accountant at the end of the year. That's how I manage it. And so we knew that this was an absolute need, something that we could do to help our customers. So this is integrated with our mobile banking app. It was launched in January this year. It's now across both iOS and Android. And it allows our customers who are in small business to be able to manage, store, track their receipts, and also it gets reconciled against your transaction history. Now, small business accounting for the customers that are a little bit more advanced. So there are a lot of businesses, we bank a lot of them as well. And we wanted to say, well, if you are a little bit more of the type who like to manage your finances, that's what we found in a lot of small businesses. Can we give you a tool to help you take that further than just receipt management? And that's where we chose to partner with a company called FreeAgent, a Scottish-based fintech company providing cloud-based accounting software for small businesses for the 1 to 10 employee range, which is the majority, as I've said, of small businesses in the UK. And what is amazing is it is integrated with our data. So your bank data shows up and you can file it directly with HMRC. So this has been really important to try to help our customers with their accounting needs. So these are some of the high-level examples. And I figured it's time for cake. I mean, we've eaten a little bit of pasta and things, or a bit of fruits and things. So I bake a lot. I cook a lot. I eat a lot. I bake a lot. You know, it's all of that. But so in terms of I was thinking about the supper clubs and everything I do and what I do for our customers. There are a lot of parallels. And first, I'll probably talk about, well, 6. Why 6? That's a random number. So in 1956, a cognitive psychologist called George Miller actually did a load of tests to test how people can remember different frequencies of tones, lengths of lines, you know, numbers, all kinds of things. And his paper is literally called The Magic Number 7, plus or minus 1 or 2. So I figured 7 might be a little bit hard after lunch, so I went down to 6. Make it just a little bit easier. He found that most people, short-term memory, 6 seems to be a good, 7 was a good number, plus or minus 1 or 2. So I'll give you 6. So the first thing that's really important is fresh ingredients. So whenever I bake or I cook, I love using Clarence Court eggs. They have the creamiest, most wonderful orange, yellow yolks, and they always make my cakes look great. So when we're talking about innovation, it's really important to pick fresh ingredients, so fresh thinking and fresh people into coming up with what you want to do. So in the projects I do, I look at the team. And actually, when I'm hiring, I look at specific qualities of people who are better suited to it. And that's where I look for people, and we talk about diversity a lot, but it's beyond race or gender or age or anything. What I'm looking for are people who think differently. So I don't want a team of all extroverts. I mean, if you have too many jazz hands, it's just a bit crazy. So you want a combination of extroverts and introverts. I like also to look for people who are doing things outside of work, outside of a day job. The reason that is important to me is because it shows that they have more than one interest and they get involved in more experiences. Just the simple fact that they do other things means they get exposed to more people, different ideas. And when they do that, I find that those kind of people think very differently and they have a lot more to add. So fresh ingredients, fresh thinking is really important in coming up with something that is good. Know your market. This is my husband. Me and my husband. He's French. I know you can tell. And we loved, when we decided to get married in France, I really, really wanted this, like this croquembouche. It was like, it's a beautiful French cake. Imagine a tower of cream puffs. That's really what it is. And I absolutely loved it. And our caterer knew exactly what to make because he interviewed, we did taste tests, we talked and everything, and they created this wonderful cake. And there's this thing where French people like to light their cakes on fire as well, which is awesome, which makes for a very exciting wedding. So it's the same when you're doing innovation projects. It's really important to actually know what your customers are thinking. So important to get them into the room. What is it do you like? Do you actually have this problem? Is this something? Am I solving some sort of a pain point for you? And this is where we kind of really test that theory. So know your market. Do you know what customer segment you want to go to? For example, when we launched Quora, the chatbot, we already knew we had demand because our customers were constantly messaging our web chat agents. In fact, we weren't able to meet the demand. We'd have to turn it off because we didn't have enough agents to answer the web chat queries. So we already knew and built that there was a demand. We also did a lot of research. So we knew how our web chatters, we taught them how to talk to our customers, but actually now we're talking about a robot speaking to customers. How do they want to be addressed? How do they want to be talked? And that was fascinating. Customers said they didn't want to be, tricked into talking to a robot. They actually wanted it to be upfront and clear. And we actually played with a lot of different ways of saying, I am an automated service, so that customers didn't feel like they were tricked. And tone of voice. We actually went and found a Myers-Briggs personality. We found one of the web chatters who was really highly rated, high customer satisfaction scores. We found her Myers-Briggs and we trained that into our chatbot. The tone of voice that she had or the way she had for explaining things. So we tried to implement that there. And then we further refined it constantly by testing it with smaller segments of customers before bringing it out wider. Believe. This is me cooking a pot of the stew that I am famous for in another life. So, and every time I get in front of that stove, I feel alive. There's something that just goes through me. I can hear my mother talking to me, and it is just the most amazing thing. So when you're a small business and you're running that, you will stay up late. You will get up early. To cook and make sure your customers are happy. You will do absolutely everything to make sure that it's a success. That's the same when you're trying to do an innovation project in a large bank. Do you actually believe in the project? Because if there are people who are on the project who do not believe in it, they're not going to get up early. They're not going to stay late. They're not going to help you succeed. In fact, if there's a little obstacle that comes up, they will probably just let it blow you over. So you need to actually believe in what you're trying to execute in order to get through that. Otherwise, the first time InfoSec or privacy or some other risk colleague pops up and says, no, you can't do that, you'd be a pushover. And that is actually something that I see quite systemic in a lot of large corporations, not just banks, but large corporations. Do the people running the projects actually believe in it? When I was running the receipts management project, I believed fiercely in the product, but so did the project manager. And I also had an exec sponsor who was willing to make pragmatic decisions about risk, accept them, and have good conversations in order to make sure we got over the line. Because we were very clear on our vision. We knew exactly where we wanted to get to, and that's really important. We all have to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And there will be a few people who are off-key, don't get me wrong. But it's trying to overcome that and making sure you have enough people and momentum behind you who are willing to work with you. Otherwise, what you might find in a lot of large companies is that you'll have a lot of people who are there to play innovation theater. They are there to just kind of pretend that, I'm innovation, I'm great, I have such a cool job. And then they do it for like 6 months and they go off somewhere to do something else because they got something on their TV. So that's the kind of people you probably want to watch out for, is what I would say. Better together. So this is really important. I could easily sit there and write a new recipe for cake. But why did I do that? There's millions of recipes online. And actually, someone like Michel Roux Jr., who I absolutely love, he is the father of French pastry in the UK and and loads and loads of Michelin stars. And he's just a really, really sweet, sweet guy. Absolutely love him to death. And he has a pastry book, which I absolutely love. And what I'll do is I'll take his recipe and I'll make some tweaks. But he's already kind of done the hard yards. He's tested and learned what it takes to make that pot brisée or that specific cake or whatever it is. And actually, it'd be foolish for me to try to recreate it from scratch. Better that I actually take what he's done and make tweaks to it to my taste. If I wanted something slightly saltier or sweeter, etc., that's what's important. So that's also important to realize when you're innovating, it doesn't always mean you have to start from scratch. Innovation can be someone else who's gone through those hard yards and actually tested and learned and created a product that has actual customers using it already. So so as a bank, we are big on seeing whether or not there are partnerships that we can leverage in order to create better experiences. So when I launched receipt management, I chose Sensibel, which is a Canadian-based fintech company, to do receipts management. CEO Corey Gross is someone I absolutely love because literally he will walk on the streets looking for receipts on the floor, pick them up, take photos of him, just to make the machine learning in his algorithm a little bit better. And that is a level of obsession and perseverance that I honestly don't think anyone in RBS will ever get to. So actually, in this case, it makes perfect sense that rather than try to do our own receipt capture, that we leverage someone who's already obsessive with the customer experience, who's already knows what works and what's not working, and then tweak it, change the front end, make it look NatWest, make it look RBS, make sure that it's fit for the UK public. So when we first met with Corey, he had already integrated with some of the big banks in Canada, and that was big, for us. So that showed their ability to work with big banks in another country, but that meant that we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from a very high level playing field. I love soufflés. They're so wonderful. They're like soft and jiggly and everything, but they are so difficult to cook and bake. So you need the right conditions. So in order to make a soufflé, you need to make sure the oven is hot. You gotta measure out every single ingredient. You gotta make sure you've whisked your egg whites to the perfect consistency and that you've put it in a certain way. And that's also what's really important when you're doing innovation. Is your oven hot enough? Is the bank ready for it? Are you ready for the innovation project? So questions like, do you have funding? Has someone actually given you money to go do something? Secondly, do you have someone willing to stick their neck out on the line for you? Do you have a responsible owner, someone who's willing to make all the product owner decisions on it? Are you clear on what you need? Like, what is a nice to have for the customer versus a need to have for your proposition to work? Those conditions are really, really important. And in the same case, when we were launching Free Agent, we were very clear on what that proposition was. We knew exactly where we want to play, what space we want to be. We had an exec. And the bank was ready for it. We hadn't done very much new and innovative for small business customers in quite some time. And it was a combination of all of those things. As a bank, we already had an innovation forum from the very top. So our CEO meets random people, I will say, around the bank every month to see what innovations we want to do. And that is really, really important. So is the bank ready? Because I've also been in projects while I was in RBS where we tried to do something and it was just so hard because actually people hadn't come around to it yet. They weren't ready. They weren't ready to back it or put their neck on the line or make compromises or talk about things for the good of the customer. So that is probably a little bit of soul searching if any of you are in this space. I make a Burmese throne bread. It's called palata. It is, if you haven't made it before, it's notoriously one of those really difficult things to do, but it is something I absolutely love. So in order to make sure I was making the best one for my customers at our supper club, I tried and tested it with all kinds of different flours. You know, I used like 5 different flours, and I could have made, and I adjusted like milk and butter and all these kinds of things. And I could have just made a big recipe where I would make hundreds of these breads. But instead, I just made 2 or 3 of each to try it. You know, so I can only use a little bit of it and to trial and to see which combination made it the best. And that's really important in innovation. I think a lot of times large corporates and the bank will try to do everything, kitchen sink it, you know, and actually that's not always the best way to go about it. With Quora, what we actually did is we tested it internally with our employees to see how they responded. You know, we learned a lot from that. Then we only released it to one of our brands. We released it to the Royal Bank website and on our support center webpage. So very limited. We knew customers were going to look for things there. We learned a lot, I will say that, in our first week. And actually, we could have trained it on the thousands of queries we get a day. Instead, we focused on the top 20. We only trained it on the top 20 queries that we kept seeing come up over and over. We trialed it, and when we fixed that, when we got better, then we went to a further part of the website, then we went to NatWest, and then we went wider, and now we have it in the mobile app. So, and through all that, we learned a whole host of things about customers, how they interact, how to understand when they try to put 10 questions in one, and all kinds of things. So, just remember, it's important to test and learn. So I'll leave you with this slide, which was made by Gela Boscovich, who's one of my besties, I would say. She's founder of Femtech Global and also FinTech Extraordinaire at Rainmaking, if you've met her before. So the question is, you know, how do you think when it comes to innovation? Do you try to go through the route that you're told to go through, or do you try to think outside of the box? And as Mary Berry, we can't do cake without Mary Berry. Cooking and baking is physical and mental therapy. So happy cake baking. Thank you. I believe do we have time for questions? Any questions?
Yeah, so I was curious about how you innovate throughout the business. Is it just your team that innovate, or in what other areas the bank innovation?
No, that's a very good question. So I look after the bank-wide innovation. The things I've showed you is from because I used to be just in our retail and small business area, and then now I look after kind of the whole bank-wide. I would say that innovation goes throughout. I know it's in my job title, but it's a bit of an overrated kind of word. So I have a personal opinion of what true innovation is. What I would say is that continuous improvement is really, really important, and that happens throughout the bank. That definitely happens all the way throughout the bank. Now, in order to maintain so that my workload isn't ridiculous, then there are certain definitions that we apply to what innovation is, I would say. For me personally, true innovation happens when you're not just digitizing an existing service. So if you have a mortgage and you make it paperless, that's not exactly innovation. That is very important and something we absolutely need to do, but not necessarily true innovation. I think true innovation happens when you have new customer propositions, where you're really shifting the paradigm and doing something completely new. And you're also looking at a new market, for example, that maybe you haven't looked at before. So if you wanted to do something in the retiree space and it's something that a product that you haven't, a customer segment you haven't targeted in the past and you're trying to give them something totally new, then I think that's where the innovation comes from. I think that's where it gets interesting. Yourself, yes.
Continue on that, kind of lead to issue, you talked about the 6 steps, and the scale being
Yes.
the trickiest one.
Oh, yes.
When it comes to decide to scale some of those innovation projects, do you do that within those, within the innovation area, or do you actually try to federate? How does the scale part
Sure.
work?
No, absolutely. So the way it works in for us at the bank is one of the things I'd like to think that we actually got right is having our innovation from the start, and that. I might be saying too much here, but oh well. There's so we have an innovation forum, and that is owned and run by P&L owners, is what I would say. So people who do innovation have to have sponsorship from people who own P&L in the bank. That is what we found to be really important. And also, it's what we found over lots of experimenting. I'm not going to say we got it right off the bat, but over lots of years of experimenting, is that the ones that succeeded the most were the projects that had that P&L owner, that senior responsible owner exec from the beginning. So it's not someone that just walks in when we're ready to scale. It's someone who has skin in the game and is actually willing to accept budget. So for example, if you're going to create something that will generate sales, this person has to say, I believe that that will generate a 2% uplift in my sales next year.
But from a delivery capability perspective,
Yes.
has it been the innovation team that was responsible for rolling out?
No. So, well, yes and no. So what I would say is the innovation team, the way we work at RBS is there is an innovation team, and they are responsible very much for finding solutions, guiding the way, so to speak. And also doing a lot of scouting to see what's out there. We have offices in Silicon Valley, in Israel, et cetera, and we are always looking for what's new, what can we, some of the identify stuff, I would say. And actually, what we found works best is when we have people who are in the business. So people who work under that senior exec, for example, who's sponsoring the project. They are the ones who are product owners, to talk tech speak, for the delivery of any of the innovation. And that is both for the POC and for scale. So they have accountability for both. Sorry. Did you have a question or? Sorry.
Quick talk over. I'm seeing much more data science events now. The
Yes.
data science team seems to start to have a product manager role. They're starting to work on product development, and some of the managers they're going out. I wonder if you see that as a positive development, or if you think rather the data science people should be part of these collaborative multidisciplinary teams, because it seems like there's an alternative approach emerging.
So my point of view is it's important to be able to rely on people with their specialisms. Where I find a lot of difficulty is when someone, for example, someone's in, say, privacy or risk, or data analytics is another one. They have a specialism, and we rely on them for a certain service when we're building our products. And that's across whether it's innovation or normal products. So we definitely want to know, well, where's the data? How can we host it? Where should we put it? You know, how can we get the right data? And we absolutely want. Now, the problems we get is when they don't do the basics before they start giving us, giving product recommendations. And I think there's a fine line, a combination. Now, what I would say is that there's a lot of innovation and improvement that needs to be done to data and analytics on their own. So yes, data scientists, in-house, outsource, that is a big question. You know, we've outsourced a lot of it in the past, but actually we have a lot of great people internally. And how long before we tip the scale and start hiring people away from Google? You know, that's that's another question. And if they want to create a product, like they should absolutely be creating data and analytics products for the businesses to use. And that requires a level of innovation. So they should be creating, you know, data warehouses, lakes, and access points for us to be able to build other things too. And I will absolutely, and I do work quite closely with our head of innovation for data and analytics, I would say, in order to do things. So it is multidisciplinary. I would say it depends on the scale as well. So if we're doing something larger scale, then you start to need more of that kind of expertise from all the areas and all the policy owners, not just data analytics. If it's smaller, then you can get away with just, you know, with maybe less input. Did you have a question? Oh, sorry, I'm at time. Sorry. Thank you.